Welcome to episode 5 of Digital Innovation Talks. My name is Konstantinos Vadratsikas, and I will be your host today. I work for Stimmuli for Social Change as a researcher and project management, and my involvement with AfriConEU focuses on designing tools to assess the impact of the AfriConEU Academy. Digital Innovation Talks is a theme for our AfriConEU vidcast series. For the ones wondering what a vidcast is, it's simply a podcast that contains video content. So, the series includes 12 monthly episodes for April 2022 to March 2023, and each episode will explore a different topic related to the EU African Digital Innovation Hubs and startup ecosystems. For the one who watches for the first time, AfriConEU is a project that aspires to create the first Transcontinental Networking Academy to support African and European digital innovation hubs in capacity building, knowledge sharing, networking, collaboration, joint projects, and venture development. The project has received funding from the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program and is implemented from February 2021 until January 2024. It involves 4 partners from Africa and 7 partners from Europe. So, let's start. The topic for our episode today is the barriers of transcontinental partnerships and how to solve them. Let me introduce you to our guest for today, Peace Odili, Executive Director of Emerging Communities for Africa and Nigeria. Welcome, Peace. Tell us more
Thank you.
about you and the Emerging Communities for Africa.
Okay. So, like Konstantinos said, my name is Peace from Emerging Communities in Nigeria. We're a non-profit focused on catalyzing technology development to solve problems in entrepreneurship and social challenges in the emerging communities in Africa. Our programs are focused around bridge of gap between men and women in STEM, human capital development, to be able to have programs that build the consciousness of young people in tech and how to be able to solve problems with tech.
Okay, so Peace, during the last few weeks, we got in touch with our community and followers, and we collected some interesting questions for you. So let's see what the audience wants to know. Question number 1. Do you think that the knowledge sharing between Africa and European Digital Innovation Hub can lead to innovation, and why?
Yes, I do believe this. But first off, I need to define knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing is that transference of experience, skills, information between 2 or more partners, right? And then we know that from knowledge and experience sharing births innovation. And then we know how Europe's economy seemed to have grown over the years, right? They're a developed country. And definitely there are innovative ideas that we know that they must have worked with. Now, to be able to unlock innovative approaches between the Innovation Hub in Africa and Europe, there has to be that knowledge sharing, where to be able to solve problems in Africa, we can understudy Europe and how they were able to solve their challenges, as well as much as possible to be able to have conversations with Africa Digital Innovation Hub, in which we know that there would always be something to learn. It's always easy to think that innovation borders on tech. Yes, it does. But innovation simply means being able to do the same things in a more efficient way. So I am sure that from knowledge sharing, we would understand the differences in cultures, the differences in Africa and Europe, to be able to come to a meeting point and learn from each other.
What are the stereotypes that block the partnership between Africa and Europe?
Okay, thank you for that question. We all know that when those in Europe hear Africa, the first thing that comes to your mind is one country, forgetting that Africa is a continent on its own with 54 independent countries with distinct peculiarities. So there's always that preconceived notion that Africa, the poor persons in Africa, poverty, and then crime, fraud, as well as we know the unstable and declining GDP coupled with insecurity. So these are like the various stereotypes that we know that has blocked partnership between Africa and Europe. Persons are wary as to who and who they are having conversations with in Africa. But there's one thing that we know has been able to go on over the years is that Africa has been shifting from a consumer mindset to a developing mindset, leading solutions. For example, Africa is doing so well in fintech and agri-tech. We need to be able to move beyond these stereotypes to know that Africa is a continent. As much as we might not have access to modern technologies that a lot of people think we are growing, that's why it's a developing country. It's a developing country rather, and with conversations, especially, for example, using the AfriConEU project, we know that these stereotypes are being resolved. It's been broken because there is the possibility to actually have a working partnership between Africa and Europe, if only we have partners in Europe coming together to sit down, have dialogue, having roundtable conversations to understand the needs of Africa, and then that partnership can happen.
Okay, thank you, Peace. So let's move to the third question. How do you think can smooth communication be enhanced in partnerships with cultural differences?
Okay, thank you for that question. I like that you asked that. I think the first thing would be to be able to acknowledge cultural differences. Uh, there's no need ignoring it or overlooking it. For there to be a working partnership, a mutually beneficial partnership, partners need to be able to sit down to acknowledge what the cultural differences are, identify a common language to be able to have that dialogue. Ones and zeros in Africa is the same thing as ones and zeros in Europe. So collaboration transcends cultural barriers. Innovation is a universal language, and so we have to be able to focus on the underlying commonality. Science and technology being that a common factor between Africa and Europe. And then another option would be to be able to create a distinct work culture. For example, a different work culture from what it is in Europe and what it is in Africa. This work culture is usually known as like concept of hybrid, where we can combine the work culture in Europe and in Africa to be able to have a meeting point to work together. We can infuse some of these things, that some of the experiences in Europe and Africa. I would also like to still make reference to the AfriConEU project. There are 4 countries in Africa on the project as well as in Europe. And one way or the other, if there is something that we've been able to do, is to be able to have conversations, to have meetings, to have roundtable discussions where everybody is listing what every partner is listing what their needs are. Those in Europe are trying to understand how can we come into Africa, what are the things that we can succeed in Africa. So I believe that with this, having willingness from partners in both continents, we can have that smooth communication enhanced.
Okay, thank you. And do you think there is a difference between partnerships working in developed and developing countries?
Yes, to a large extent, I believe there is. We know that in developed countries, partnerships are usually more symbiotic. As much as there are plethora of differences between developed and developing countries, we know that developed countries usually focus on that balanced perspective. There's inclusivity. Everyone comes to the table to have a say. Every party is listened to. There's no power imbalance, so to speak. But then in developing countries, we realize that we have more persons, especially when we have development partners. They usually look at it in developing countries as they're doing us a favor, and then there's that imbalance, especially if one of the partners is the one that is the funder, So as much as possible, I know that if we have enough conversations, that's one of the things that AfriConEU is coming to do, to be able to show that there is that possibility, regardless of the differences between developed and developing countries. As much as possible, if we're able to look beyond some of our differences and look beyond the challenges with borders, we know that this is something that we can solve.
All right. And does the appearance of collaboration mask the asymmetries of power?
Yes, I believe so. Just like I said earlier, when there is the funding partner, there's usually that power imbalance. But if there is something that is possible to be done, is to be able to ensure that all parties come to the table, lay their cards on the table, and be able to have that dialogue. As we know, Africa right now, we're really growing and then we're emerging in tech, and there are lots of Africa talents. Collaboration means both parties, that's all parties, come together to bring something to the table. I believe that if we have more parties having something to offer, like I said, in Africa, there's that burst in talent, we realize that there's usually that collaboration being possible. Another thing again that we need to take cognizance of would be that it is possible to be able to have that genuine inclusivity. We don't have funding partners who just believe that they have a particular way that they want to do things, and they do not particularly care what this person thinks. But to be able to have that inclusivity, like I said, is to ensure that the complexities, the power structures, all these things, they're broken down, and everybody has equal rights. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So as much as possible, we just need to be able to ensure that collaboration seems to be on a balanced scale. Nobody seems to feel like because this person is bringing in the fund, the person has more power over the other partner. So yes, collaboration will be able to bring that balance and to mask the asymmetries of power.
Okay. Now let's move to the sixth question. It's a hot one. How do you think partnership issues relating to funding can be minimized?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we know, just like I've been saying over and over again, usually there's always that imbalance when there is the funding partner and then there is the other partner that is being received. But if I have to give a practical example, again, it would be the AfriConEU project. There should be like an operational budget with clear definition of roles and responsibilities of parties, where right from the beginning of the conversation, every party knows that they're supposed to do this, they're supposed to do that. There is that working document that guides the relationship. This would also help with effective communication. If there's something that I know that the AfriConEU does is to have monthly meetings with partners, and this has greatly helped because usually during the week there's the exchange of mails, but we come to this meeting to address it. That is that effective communication and sustained dialogue. If there are any challenges, if there are any problems, it's being addressed. And because the funding partners do not make you feel like they are helping, yes, they are helping, but at the same time, it's a win-win for both parties. You're funding a project for something, and then the operations partner is also doing something. So everybody is bringing something to the table. So to be able to minimize, just to summarize, would be to have that working document that clearly defines each partner roles. Number two is to be able to have that operational budget, at the beginning that clearly states what's and what and what funding is being provided for with clear description, right? And then as much as possible, effective and continued communication. There should be that dialogue as well as transparency. It's possible for the partner receiving funding to feel like, okay, because you're giving me the funds does not mean you should be all up in my face. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So as much as possible, transparency would also help to be able to minimize the challenges that come with our funding.
Okay, and on what basis should the stakeholders be engaged?
Yes, thank you again, Konstantinos. Stakeholders engagement is the practice of being able to influence variety of outcomes, right? This is where all parties to the partnership come together to have communications, consultation, negotiation, compromise, relationship building, uh, to be able to understand interests, values, concerns, and perspective, you know. So these are the basis for which they have to be engaged, because I don't really think it is so possible for partners to be on a particular project or in a partnership, and just one person seems to like have all the say. Why don't we have that roundtable discussion where we negotiate, there's the compromise, to be able to understand the differences, your culture, to be able to understand what the working culture is like, to be able to understand the proper way to be able to get work done. Again, I'll still make reference to the African EU project. For the capacity building programs that have to like be done in Africa, there was that conversation with stakeholders in Africa. There are different polls that are usually sent to be able to understand what are the needs of stakeholders. So we're supposed to be engaging them based on their needs, their wants. Imagine where you have a situation where, because a partner wants to do something in a particular location, you do not go to the location to get like a needs assessment. Phase one of the African EU project was context analysis, to be able to understand what the needs are, to be able to understand how they would want to be helped or to be able to support. So these are like the basis that I believe that stakeholders can be engaged.
Thank you, Peace, for that. You've talked about differences, so let's go to another question that our audience has for you. What do you think are the practical ways that gender issues can be addressed and overcome in partnerships?
Oh, thank you, Konstantinos. First off, I think that there has to be that willingness for partners to have open dialogues and conversations that addresses gender. For example, if we pay close attention during consultation process, the partners on the project can have very effective communication as to. I know that there are some donor agencies who believe that project managers should be women. This will not lead me to saying that there should be like a code of conduct or a formal policy that states that a total, like a particular number of women should be on a particular project, or should be able to have the authority, that's governing authority. There should be that equal compensation, between male and female. I would like to give an example with another project. Like, I think I was on the board of a project, and one thing that partners were able to do is to be able to have working groups, closed working groups that are headed by women. So with that, we know that there is no gender bias. They are allowed to make decisions. There's equal compensation, even for pay, because you are sitting in a leadership or you are heading a role that would eventually lead to more pay. So we should have partners who are more interested in having female have equal access, have equal opportunities as much as their male counterparts. So just to reiterate, to have that code of conduct, like a formal policy, to pay close attention to stakeholders consultation process, how many persons are on the board, how many persons are working in your organization, to be able to have equal compensation, and to be able to allow more women be part of governing process and decision making.
Thank you, Peach, for that. I have one more last question that our followers are asking for you. How do you think that Africa and EU can bridge the gap between the two continents?
Okay, I'm sure that we're already doing that, because so far, if we look at our activities so far, as well as the new activities that have been coming on board, we know that one way that, or the ways that African EU that they've been doing actually, I think I've mentioned a few as I answered questions. Number one is to be able to have that effective communication and dialogue, and we've been doing that, like I mentioned, in our monthly meetings. Number two is to be able to understand the needs, of the African continent that Europe can come in. Number three is to be able to understand culture, understand what are the barriers to having a successful partnership, and be able to solve it, right? And as much as possible, if there is also something that I know has always been coming up so far in activities, is to be able to provide incentive. As much as possible, the African EU is working around provision of incentives to have persons being like a part of the project. There's that inclusivity, even as it is now, the African EU Ambassadors Program that we're running is being headed by a partner in Africa. If we look at so far, the partners on the project, we have as much women as and men. So I guess this question just summarizes everything that I've said so far. And in my opinion, and I'm sure Konstantinos would also agree to this, I believe that we have been bridging that gap between Africa and Europe.
Thank you so much, Peach, for sharing your thoughts with us. Do you have any final comment you wanted to make?
I think maybe the final comments that I would want to make is just to be able to put it out there, especially for funding partners and donor agencies. As much as this would always cause that imbalance of power, I believe that if our funding partners can, as much as possible, communicate that they are not particularly doing the other partner a favor, but as much as possible, they are coming to be able to assist partners who are really doing great, have very inspiring projects, get the work done. If funding partners realize or see it's more like a win-win, because everybody is putting in the work to ensure that there is that growth and there is that synergy. So it should be seen more like a partnership than a charity organization. A lot of donors should not make it look like their help is more coming from a place of charity, but should come from a place of partnership and a place of growth.
So that was episode 5 of Digital Innovation Talks, the African EU vidcast series. Thanks so much for watching, and do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and stay up to date. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you, Konstantinos.